Did you know Israel has a body withholding policy, and it is the constitution that allows Israeli authorities to withhold the bodies of Palestinians? On July 31st, 2025, the Supreme Court of Israel upheld the continued withholding of 14-year-old Wadia Elyan's body, nearly 18 months after Israeli forces killed him on February 5, 2024 near the West Bank. Wadia's case exemplifies the extent of state's necropolitical regime. It controls over Palestinian life that extends even beyond death. The Israeli authorities claim the teenager attempted a stabbing attack against a police officer, but a video footage presented by his family shows him being shot while fleeing the scene. Even more disturbing additional footage appears to show a second fatal shooting while Wadia lay motionless on the road. Despite the circumstances surrounding his death and his young age, the Supreme Court accepted the state's position that Wadia's body could continue to be held as leverage for future prisoner exchange negotiations with Hamas.
It's not new. It's not something that Israel started after October 7. It's something that have been there for years. Israel withholds the bodies of Palestinians in order to include them in swap deals with Hamas as bargaining chips. This was made in a cabinet decision back in 2017. First, Israel withheld bodies of those who are identified with Hamas and who committed as defined very hard crimes as defined in the Israeli law. After this cabinet decision was confirmed in a Supreme Court ruling from 2019. But later, the cabinet decision was updated, amended, and Israel started holding bodies of Palestinians regardless of their identification with any movement or...
The numbers surrounding this practice are staggering. According to Defense for Children International, Palestine, as of February 2025, Israel is withholding the bodies of more than 45 Palestinian children. And the Jerusalem Legal Aid and Human Rights Center reports that as of May 2025, Israeli authorities are withholding a total of 668 Palestinian bodies. The National Campaign to Retrieve Martyrs' Bodies documented that Israel held the bodies of 198 Palestinians killed in 2024 alone. This represents a 167% increase from 256 bodies held in 2024 to at least 684 by April 2025. The most disturbing aspect of Israel's necropolitical regime is the existence of what Palestinians called Maqabir al-Arqam, the cemeteries of numbers. These are unmarked graves in the closed military zones where Palestinian bodies are buried with only numbered metal plates instead of names. Each number corresponds to an individual file kept by Israeli security authorities. The burial conditions are often degrading, with bodies buried without proper insulation and multiple bodies sometimes interred in the same pit. There are several such cemeteries scattered across occupied territories. The Banat Yaqub Bridge Cemetery at the Palestinian-Lebanese-Syrian border, containing hundreds of Palestinian and Lebanese victims from the 1982 war. The Bir al-Maqsur Cemetery between Jericho and the Jordan Valley, marked with a Hebrew sign reading Cemetery for the Enemy's Victims, and the Rividim and Shahitia cemeteries in the Jordan Valley and Wadia Hammam village respectively. Israel's body withholding practice is not something new. It has deep historical roots in colonial administrative structures. Human rights organizations report that some graves date back to 1948 and have been used extensively since armed Palestinian resistance began in June 1967. The legal foundation stems from the 1936 Defense Regulation 133 enacted by Britain during the mandatory period to temporarily bury Palestinian prisoners who died in their custody during the Great Revolt. Israel adopted this regulation upon its establishment in 1948. But how does Israel get the authority to withhold bodies? The judicial legitimization of this practice began with the 1992 case of Mustafa Barakat, a Palestinian who died under Israeli torture in custody. When his family petitioned to overturn army's restriction on his funeral procession, The Israeli High Court ruled in Barkat versus OC Central Command that the army was authorized to impose limitations on funeral processions for security and public order. It is simply not a matter of maintaining a public order. These bodies become bargaining chips against resistance fronts. In 1995, the court issued its first ruling explicitly allowing body withholding as a bargaining chip in Abbas versus State of Israel case, when it permitted the army to withhold the body of Hamas member Hassan Abbas in exchange for information about a missing Israeli soldier. In a remarkably brief 4-line ruling, the court concluded it could not find withholding the dead body unreasonable. The practice of withholding reached unprecedented levels during the Second Intifada, when Israeli authorities withheld hundreds of Palestinian bodies. The second uprising resulted in the killing of 3,000 Palestinians, and Israel's body withholding policy became a default rather than an exception. In 2004, the Israeli Attorney General adopted an official policy allowing the state to withhold corpses for potential deals, ostensibly limiting this to concrete deals with an enemy for an exchange of corpses. Rather than indefinite detention, however, this limitation proved meaningless in practice, as it merely provided legal veneer for an already systematic policy. The majority of bodies currently held by Israel date back to the Second Intifada period, with some families waiting more than 2 decades for their loved ones' return. During this era, Israel intermittently returned over 400 dead Palestinian bodies between 1991 and 2008, often in exchange for information or as a diplomatic gesture. In September 2019, the Israeli Supreme Court formalized its position, ruling that military commanders could temporarily withhold Palestinian bodies killed by Israeli forces for potential use as bargaining chips in future negotiations. This decision provides judicial cover for a practice that has been occurring for decades. The policy received further legal codification through the Counter-Terrorism Law Amendment No. 3 of 2018, which explicitly authorized Israeli police to withhold Palestinian bodies and impose restrictions on their funerals, specifically to Palestinian citizens of Israel and Palestinian residents of occupied East Jerusalem. The law permits police to withhold bodies for up to 10 days until families agree to conditions including nighttime burials, limited funeral locations, restricted number of mourners, and financial deposits to guarantee compliance with restrictions. Originally targeting residents of occupied territories, this legislation extended similar policies to Palestinian citizens of Israel. Following October 7th, Israel's body withholding policy has metastasized dramatically. In June 2024, the Israeli Security Cabinet decided to continue withholding bodies of Palestinian citizens allegedly involved in attacks. On September 1st, 2024, the cabinet extended this policy to withhold Palestinian citizens' bodies as long as Israeli hostages remained held in Gaza.
Now, something that happened after October 7 is Israel starting to withhold also Palestinians, bodies of Palestinians with Israeli identity, citizens of Israel. And this is the first time that the state of Israel withholds bodies of its own citizens, though they are Palestinians, but they have the Israeli citizenship. It started with the case of Walid Daqqa. He was a prisoner for around 40 years, and he died while in prison after medical negligence by the prison authorities. And with his death, his body was withheld for a year and 4 months now. The Israeli Supreme Court approved withholding the body of Walid Daqqa, stating that he has a very symbolic value for being one of, as defined, the leadership within the prison and within the Palestinian community, and his name was on the table in previous swap deals with Hamas. But then we saw after Walid Daqqa that Israel started holding more and more bodies of Palestinian citizens. We petitioned in the name of 5 families whose sons' bodies are being withheld right now, and all of them has no symbolic value, and they are not leadership or something, but their bodies are still withheld, and the Supreme Court approved this withholding of their bodies.
The Supreme Court's January 2nd, 2025 decision upheld this sweeping policy, rejecting 6 petitions filed by Adala on behalf of families whose bodies have been withheld for prolonged periods. The practice serves multiple functions beyond simple bargaining leverage. The authorities often call families for interrogations and show them pictures of the body, conducting DNA tests that require samples from first-degree relatives. This process creates ongoing trauma as families maintain hope that their loved ones might still be alive as long as they cannot see the body. The main reason that they do this is to collectively punish the family of the martyr. The practice places an enormous psychological burden on families who regularly receive unverified rumors about their deceased relatives from former prisoners. The withholding of Palestinian bodies constitutes multiple violations of international law. Customary international humanitarian law requires that parties to armed conflict respect the dead, who must be disposed of in a respectful manner, and whose remains must be returned to their families. Article 17 of the Second Geneva Convention mandates that the deceased be held in accordance with their religious rites. The body withholding practice also violates the Fourth Geneva Convention's prohibition on collective punishment and amounts to torture and ill treatment under international human rights law. Beyond psychological warfare and political leverage, the body withholding policy serves to conceal evidence of torture and abuse in Israeli detention facilities. Since the current war began, at least 62 documented cases of Palestinian detainees have died in Israeli prisons due to torture. Tal Steiner, executive director of the Public Committee Against Torture in Israel, notes that holding the bodies is damaging our ability to conduct forensic investigations every day, week, and month that passes by since a person's death makes it harder and harder to find the truth. The withholding of bodies prevents proper autopsies that could reveal evidence of illegal activities and torture. The current war in Gaza has seen unprecedented seizures of Palestinian bodies. On November 18, 2023, during Israel's assault on Al-Shifa Medical Center, occupation forces stole 145 bodies, some removed from a recently prepared graveyard inside the facility. Israeli newspaper Haaretz revealed in July 2024 that Israel was holding approximately 1,500 unidentified Palestinian bodies from Gaza in refrigerated containers. These bodies, bearing numbers but no names, has reached various stages of decomposition, with some lacking limbs or faces. Israel's systematic control over Palestinian death reflects what scholars term necropolitics, the sovereign power to dictate who may live or die, extending even beyond life itself. This practice of withholding Palestinian bodies spans several decades and affects hundreds of families across Palestine. The Israeli Supreme Court's recent ruling on Wadia Elyan's body is not an aberration, but the logical extension of decade-long policy that treats Palestinian bodies as political currency. Allowing a child's corpse to be held indefinitely as a bargaining chip reveals the extent to which Israel has normalized its policies that dehumanizes Palestinians, deny children respect in death, and inflict profound suffering on their families.